20 more gone groups of the 1960s that have fallen off the radar of time. What if the biggest names of the 60s aren't the ones you remember? From garage rock rebels to cartoon chart toppers, we're digging up the forgotten bands that once had the world singing along. You've heard their hits. Now meet the legends time left behind. The Chambers Brothers. Think you've heard every sound the 60s had to offer? Not quite. If you ever needed proof that the decade was full of musical surprises, just listen to the Chambers Brothers, a wild blend of soul, gospel, and psychedelia. These four brothers from Mississippi didn't just dabble in new sounds, they exploded onto the scene with their mind-bending 11-minute anthem, Time Has Come Today. A shorter version of the track climbed all the way to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. But before they were grooving on national radio, they were harmonizing in a small Baptist church in Lee County, Mississippi, way back in 1952. When the eldest, George Chambers, came home from the Army, he made a big move. He headed west to Los Angeles. One by one, his brothers followed, and together, they started making waves in LA's folk and gospel music circles. In 1967, their big break came. Columbia Records signed them, and Time Has Come Today became their signature hit. They put out a few more singles, but none caught fire like that first one. By 1972, the group had quietly disbanded. They gave it another shot in 1974 with an album called Unbonded, but it didn't catch on either. Still, they didn't vanish completely. The Chambers Brothers kept touring, backed up singer Maria Muldaur on a gospel album, and even lent their voices to a Levi's jeans commercial. Their name might not be the first that comes to mind when you think of the 60s, but once you hear that echoing cowbell from Time Has Come Today, you'll never forget them. The Amboy Dukes. From gritty garage roots to full-blown psychedelic rockers, the Amboy Dukes packed more punch than most folks remember. And leading the charge? None other than Ted Nugent, a name you wouldn't exactly link with the flower power crowd. A clean-living, hunting-loving rocker, Nugent always kept his distance from the drug-fueled scene that surrounded many 60s bands. Still, it was his searing guitar work that helped the Amboy Dukes find their place in rock history. Born and raised in Detroit, Nugent had been tearing through local rock scenes since he was just 12. By the mid-60s, he pulled together a group that quickly built a loyal following in Motor City. In 1968, they struck gold, or at least bronze, when they released their second album, Journey to the Center of the Mind, through Mainstream Records. The title track, featuring Nugent's riffs and lyrics by bandmate Steve Farmer, made its way to number 16 on the pop charts. Though Journey to the Center of the Mind put them on the map, their next records, Migration and Marriage on the Rocks, didn't come close to matching its success. Their last effort, Survival of the Fittest, landed in 1971, and when it flopped, Nugent decided to call it quits. At a 2009 reunion, Nugent didn't hold back, proudly declaring, "Everyone knows the Amboy Dukes are the ultimate garage band on the planet Earth." Maybe they weren't the biggest name on the charts, but when it came to raw, brain-bending rock from the heart of Detroit, the Amboy Dukes left a deep mark. The Fifth Dimension. Now here's a band that didn't just play the sounds of the 60s, they were the sound of the 60s, wrapped into one vibrant, genre-blending package. The Fifth Dimension took a little bit of everything: soul, funk, rock, Motown, Broadway, and fused it into something that was smooth, soaring, and completely their own. Originally called the Versatiles when they formed in late 1965, the group wisely rebranded as the Fifth Dimension in 1966. The lineup was packed with talent: Lamont McLemore, Marilyn McCoo, Florence LaRue, Ronald Townsend, and Billy Davis Jr. 5 powerhouse vocalists with an ear for harmony and a flair for the dramatic. Their early tracks came out under the Soul City label, which was launched by singer Johnny Rivers. But their sound couldn't be boxed in. They'd go on to record with big labels like Bell, Arista, ABC, and even Motown, all while shaping a style that was both accessible and ambitious. In 1969, they hit their peak with Aquarius, Let the Sunshine In, a medley lifted from the hit counterculture musical Hair. The song shot straight to #1, becoming an anthem for an entire generation, and solidifying the Fifth Dimension as more than just a pop act. They were the voice of an era in transition, blending optimism, soul, and theatrical flair. Paul Revere and the Raiders. What happens when you blend American history with rock and roll swagger? You get Paul Revere and the Raiders, a band as bold in fashion as they were in sound. Decked out in Revolutionary War uniforms and powered by a pounding organ, these Idaho rockers defied expectations and climbed the charts with 4 top 10 hits, including the punchy Good Thing, which you might have heard in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Their story began back in 1959 in Boise, Idaho, when frontman Mark Lindsay teamed up with keyboardist Paul Revere. At first, they were just another energetic garage band, tearing it up at college parties and fraternity houses across the Midwest. But their sound and their look set them apart. In 1962, they were handed a track that would become legendary, Louie Louie. They recorded it with high hopes, but fate had other plans. The Kingsmen released their version around the same time, and it was theirs that took off, becoming the classic we know today. The Seekers. How did a humble folk group from Australia end up becoming one of the biggest selling acts of the 1960s? Meet the Seekers, a quartet that didn't look or sound like the typical rock stars of their day, but still managed to take the world by storm. With sweet harmonies, acoustic instruments, and a sound that felt more 50s than flower power, they stood out, and it worked. Their version of the Aussie classic Waltzing Matilda became a surprising international success, helping push the group to massive fame. The Seekers didn't just top charts, they made history. They were the first Australian pop group to break through in both the UK and the US, selling a staggering 50 million records along the way. Their most beloved lineup featured Judith Durham on vocals, piano, and tambourine, Athol Guy handling the double bass and backing vocals, Keith Potcher strumming the 12-string guitar and banjo, and Bruce Woodley covering guitar, mandolin, and banjo. Together, they blended folk and pop into something truly special. In 1967, their impact was recognized in a big way. They were named Joint Australians of the Year, the only music group ever to receive that honor. But their time as a band didn't last much longer. In July 1968, Judith Durham decided to go solo, and the Seekers quietly disbanded. What's one 60s song that instantly takes you back, and who was the band behind it? Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Before costumes were a gimmick, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs were already pushing boundaries. Decked out in robes and turbans, frontman Domingo Sam Samudio brought wild showmanship to the 60s rock scene, something that would raise eyebrows today. But back then, it worked like a charm. Their rowdy hit, Wooly Bully, spent an incredible 18 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of garage rock's all-time party anthems. This Tex-Mex rock and roll group first came together in 1961 in Dallas, Texas. Alongside Samudio, the original members were Carl Medke, Russell Fowler, Omar Big Man Lopez, and Vincent Lopez. Their first recording didn't take off, and by the end of 1962, the band had split. Samudio, undeterred, joined Andy and the Night Riders as an organist, until he decided to give his old band name another shot. In 1963, Samudio brought back the Pharaohs with a new lineup and a new sound. They kicked things off with a novelty track called Haunted House, and soon landed a deal with MGM Records. Follow-ups like Juju Hand and Ring Dang Do managed some minor chart action, but nothing compared to what was coming next. Then came Wooly Bully, a loud, loose, and totally infectious track that became their biggest hit. It wasn't just a song, it was a moment. From jukeboxes to high school dances, Wooly Bully became the anthem of a good time. Barry Sadler. He wasn't part of a band, but Sergeant Barry Sadler's story is too unforgettable to leave out. A true American original, Sadler moved from the front lines of battle to the top of the music charts with a voice that honored bravery and brotherhood. In the middle of the 1960s peace movement, when protest songs filled the airwaves, Sadler's Ballad of the Green Berets took a different stand, and America listened. The song hit #1 while he was still in uniform and went on to sell a staggering 9 million copies. Sadler's military background was as real as it gets. He served in both the Air Force and the Army, eventually becoming a medic in the elite special forces. It was during this time, while recovering from injuries at Fort Bragg, that he began working on the song that would make him famous. With some help from Lieutenant Jerry Gelf, he signed a songwriting deal with a New York publisher in 1964. Sadler actually picked up the guitar during his time in the Air Force, and even played in a small trio for a while. But it was his heartfelt tribute to the Green Berets, written while he was still serving and later refined during his time in Vietnam, that struck a national chord. After his music success, Sadler took another unexpected turn. He moved to Guatemala and reinvented himself again, this time as a pulp fiction writer. His life, much like his most famous song, was full of courage, grit, and a deep sense of duty. Jan and Dean. Hailing from Los Angeles, this iconic duo helped define the sunny California sound with hits like Dead Man's Curve and the chart-topping Surf City. Though often mentioned alongside the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean weren't followers, they were pioneers. Their mix of doo-wop, surf rock, and sharp harmonies became the soundtrack for beach parties and boardwalk days in the early 60s. Surf City may have been their only gold record, but their influence ran much deeper. Too often overlooked, Jan and Dean were key players in the evolution of rock and roll, adding polish and pop sensibility to the genre before most realized it was even changing. At their peak, their name brought to mind carefree teens with sun-bleached hair, cruising the coast and dancing on Malibu beaches. But behind the catchy hooks was real musical craftsmanship. Their harmonies were tight, their arrangements clever, and their sound unmistakably fun. By 1965, their dominance on the charts had cooled a bit. Still, they managed to land several tracks in the top 30. Ever adaptable, they tried new angles, dabbling in folk rock, and even riding the Batman craze with themed singles and albums inspired by the hit TV show. The Marcels. Formed in 1959, the group was something rare for the era, racially integrated, with 2 white members and 3 black. But it wasn't just their makeup that set them apart. It was their sound. When they released Blue Moon in 1961, they didn't just cover the song, they reinvented it. Gone was the slow, dreamy vibe of earlier versions by folks like Elvis Presley. In came that unforgettable bass intro, bomp ba ba bomp, ba, bomp ba, bomp bomp. And suddenly, this song from a 1930s movie was topping the Billboard Hot 100. The record sold over 1 million copies, landed them a gold disc, and etched their name into music history. Blue Moon was later honored in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's list of 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. That's how big it was. They didn't stop there. Follow-up singles like Heartaches climbed to number 7, and they earned some buzz with the novelty track Friendly Loan. But lightning didn't strike twice, at least not on the same scale. Still, what the Marcels did in just a few years, most groups couldn't manage in a decade. Their style was bold, their harmonies tight, and their spin on an old standard, simply unforgettable. The Searchers. You may not recognize their name right away, but chances are, you've heard their music. The Searchers were one of those British invasion bands that quietly made a massive impact. Rising from Liverpool's skiffle scene, they followed right behind the Beatles and helped define the Merseybeat sound of the 1960s. Their version of Love Potion No. 9 still gets airplay today, but that's just one of many gems in their catalog. They also reimagined songs like The Drifters' Sweets for My Sweet, Jackie DeShannon's Needles and Pins, and When You Walk in the Room, and the Orlons' Don't Throw Your Love Away. Their single Sugar and Spice, written by their own producer Tony Hatch, also became a fan favorite. Alongside the swinging Blue Jeans, the Searchers were the second Liverpool band, after the Beatles, to chart in the US. In fact, both groups broke through on the exact same day, March 7th, 1964. Needles and Pins by the Searchers and Hippie Hippie Shake by the Swinging Blue Jeans both hit the Billboard Hot 100, making history. Even though they never quite reached Beatles-level superstardom, the Searchers built a lasting legacy with their jangly guitars, rich harmonies, and catchy covers. After decades of touring, they finally called it a day in 2019. But their music still finds new ears, now living on through streaming platforms, oldies stations, and even their official Facebook page. Which of these gone groups from the 60s do you still have on your playlist today? Blood, Sweat, and Tears. What happens when you throw rock, jazz, soul, and a splash of classical into a blender? You get Blood, Sweat, and Tears, one of the boldest, most experimental bands to come out of the late 60s. With a lineup that constantly evolved, including musicians from the Blues Project and even Frank Zappa's The Mothers of Invention, BS&T never stuck to one sound, and that's exactly what made them special. This boundary-breaking group from Canada didn't just follow trends, they shattered them. Their second album, the self-titled Blood, Sweat, and Tears, released in 1968, was a complete game-changer. With bold horn arrangements and genre-crossing tracks, it wowed critics and audiences alike. The album took home the Grammy for Album of the Year, beating out Abbey Road. Yes, that Abbey Road. Their music blended everything from pop hooks to R&B grooves, all wrapped in rich brass instrumentation that gave it a big band punch. And while their early years were filled with chart-topping hits and packed arenas, the road ahead was far more unpredictable. Since the 1980s, the group hasn't released a new studio album, but they've continued to perform in various forms, with a rotating cast of players keeping the legacy alive. Over time, their sound has stretched across styles, but one thing stayed the same. They've always pushed the limits of what a rock band could be. Herman's Hermits. What happens when a British invasion band quietly wins over America with charm instead of rebellion? You get Herman's Hermits, a group that might not scream rock revolution, but still racked up hits, movies, and a loyal fan base. With 7 albums, 3 feature films, and 2 chart toppers, Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, and the cheeky I'm Henry VIII, I Am. This Manchester-based band helped define the softer side of the 60s. Fronted by the boyish Peter Noone, a former soap opera actor with a natural stage presence, Herman's Hermits rode the wave of Beatlemania straight into American hearts. Their story took off when talent manager Harvey Leisberg spotted their potential and invited London producer Mickey Most, famous for working with the Animals, to catch their act in Bolton. Most came aboard as producer and shaped the band's sound and image with a firm hand, while their contemporaries like the Rolling Stones and The Who leaned into grit and rebellion. Herman's Hermits went the opposite way, polished, clean-cut, and totally safe for primetime. And for a time, that strategy worked wonders. Their lighthearted tunes and lovable image made them frequent guests on American TV and radio. The Rascals. They had the hits, but did they get the credit they truly earned? The Rascals, born out of New Jersey's vibrant music scene, were chart toppers with songs like Good Lovin' and the laid-back anthem Groovin'. Yet somehow, they often flew under the radar, overshadowed by louder names from the same era. But don't be fooled. The Rascals were every bit as influential as their more famous peers. Originally known as the Young Rascals, they exploded onto the scene with a mix of gritty garage rock and soul-drenched vocals that caught listeners off guard, in the best way. From the start, their blend of R&B spirit and rock muscle felt fresh, even revolutionary. As their music matured, so did their sound. With the release of Groovin' in 1967, they leaned into psychedelic textures, pop artistry, and global rhythms, pushing boundaries without ever losing their soulful core. As the music got deeper and more sophisticated, their name felt stuck in the past. By 1968, they dropped Young from the title and released A Beautiful Morning under the new, streamlined name, The Rascals. It was a lush, feel-good track that reflected where they were heading, musically and personally. Though they broke up in the 70s, their influence lingered. In 2013, none other than Steven Van Zandt of Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band and The Sopranos fame helped bring them back to the stage for a Broadway reunion. Manfred Mann, named after their keyboardist and co-founder, the bespectacled Manfred Mann himself, this London-based band stood out in the sea of British invasion acts by leaning into R&B, jazz, and even a bit of pop, though the pop was mostly a ticket to chart success. They weren't in it to be heartthrobs. With a thoughtful, sometimes nerdy vibe, the group came across more like musicians than pop pinups. But don't let the intellectual image fool you. They knew how to turn out a hit. Songs like Do Wah Diddy Diddy, 1964, Pretty Flamingo, 1966, and The Mighty Quinn, 1968, written by Bob Dylan, all climbed to #1 on the UK charts. Manfred Mann's roots were in rhythm and blues, and their take on it was every bit as compelling, and often more polished, than what the Rolling Stones were doing. They tackled R&B with skill, heart, and a subtle sophistication that made them stand apart. The Youngbloods. Could a gentle folk rock band ride out the whirlwind that was the 1960s? The Youngbloods did more than survive. They carved out a quiet, enduring space in one of music's loudest decades. Starting off as a house band at New York's Café Au Go Go, this trio found their groove with a soft, soulful sound that eventually gave the world one of the era's most iconic peace anthems, Get Together. Formed on the East Coast in the mid-60s, the Youngbloods blended folk, blues, and jug band roots with a dash of West Coast psychedelia, especially after relocating to the San Francisco Bay Area. Their music had a mellow depth that set them apart from the more hard-charging acts of the time. Jesse Colin Young was the heart of the band, but early records also featured songwriting by guitarist Jerry Corbett, giving their sound extra variety and warmth. Their first 2 albums, The Youngbloods and Earth Music, were produced by Felix Pappalardi, who was also known for his work with Cream. While the albums didn't explode commercially, they held up artistically, thoughtful, textured, and full of promise. One of the early standouts was Grizzly Bear, a minor hit, but it was their cover of Dino Valenti's Get Together that really defined their legacy. Though first released in 1967, Get Together didn't become a hit until 1969, when a TV public service announcement gave it new life. Its message, "Come on people now, smile on your brother," resonated deeply with a country searching for unity, pushing the track into the top 10. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment "Yes" to let us know you're still following. The Shadows. Originally called the Drifters from 1958 to 1959, they soon rebranded to avoid confusion with the American group of the same name. From there, the Shadows became the go-to instrumental rock act of the late 50s and early 60s. Their 1960 hit Apache didn't just top the UK charts for 5 weeks, it sent shockwaves through bedrooms and garages around the world as young aspiring musicians picked up guitars and tried to mimic its dreamy, echo-laced riffs. The group's secret weapon? Lead guitarist Hank Marvin and his Fender Stratocaster. With masterful control of the tremolo arm, Marvin created a twangy, lyrical sound that was both haunting and melodic. It was unlike anything on the airwaves at the time, and it quickly became a signature. Hits like FBI and Wonderful Land followed, and the Shadows even racked up 4 #1 EPs on their own. As skiffle music faded out, they stepped in with a sharper, more modern sound that lit the path for future British rockers. They weren't just backing Cliff Richard, they were teaching the UK how to rock. But when the British beat boom exploded with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Shadows' style began to feel old-fashioned. By 1968, the band officially disbanded. Procol Harum. Formed in 1967 in Southend-on-Sea, Essex, Procol Harum emerged just as psychedelic rock was blossoming. But they didn't follow the usual script, blending classical influences with blues, soul, and early progressive rock. Their sound was something else entirely, grand, moody, and rich with emotion. Their debut single, A Whiter Shade of Pale, became an instant classic. With its Bach-inspired organ intro and cryptic, poetic lyrics, it was unlike anything else on the radio. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide and became one of the defining songs of the Summer of Love. While the band never quite matched the commercial success of that single, they weren't a one-trick pony. Their albums explored everything from bluesy ballads to proto-prog epics, helping lay the groundwork for the progressive rock explosion of the 1970s. And they kept at it, cycling through lineups, but continuing to record and tour for decades. In 2018, their most iconic track received its due when A Whiter Shade of Pale was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's singles category, a recognition long overdue for a song and a band that changed what rock music could sound like. The Dave Clark Five. Hailing from Tottenham, London, this punchy, high-energy quintet knocked I Want to Hold Your Hand off the top of the British charts with their own smash, Glad All Over. And suddenly, the press was buzzing about a possible Beatles rival. While they didn't stay at the top for long, the Dave Clark Five made a massive impact. They were the first British invasion band to hit it big in the US after the Beatles, and they hit hard, appearing a record-breaking 18 times on The Ed Sullivan Show and selling over 100 million records worldwide. With 17 top 40 hits between 1964 and 1967, they churned out classics like Bits and Pieces, Because, and their energetic cover of Over and Over. What set the DC-5 apart wasn't just their volume, it was their style. Dave Clark's thunderous, stomping drum beats and Mike Smith's gritty vocals gave their songs a big, booming sound. They weren't trying to be cute or edgy. They were loud, tight, and ready to rock. And they had a gift for catchy melodies and tight harmonies, often writing their own material, which helped their music hold up surprisingly well. Despite early success, they couldn't quite keep pace with the rapidly evolving music scene. The band disbanded in 1970, but not before leader Dave Clark made history in another way. He managed and produced the group himself, securing one of the best royalty deals of the era. The Archies. Imagine a band that never toured, never gave interviews, and wasn't even real, yet topped the charts. Meet the Archies, the cartoon group behind 1969's bubblegum pop smash, Sugar Sugar. Created by music mogul Don Kirshner for The Archie Show, the band featured vocals from session singer Ron Dante, with Tony Wine and Jeannie Thomas rounding out the sound. Their first single, Bang Shang-a-Lang, flirted with the top 20, but Sugar Sugar became a global hit, selling millions and making them the first fictional band to reach #1. Though they faded by the 70s, their candy-coated legacy lives on. Sugar, Sugar remains a pop culture staple, sweet proof that even cartoon bands can make music history. 20 most hated 1970s bands. The 70s was a decade overflowing with iconic bands. Some loved to hate. Maybe it's the music, maybe it's their personalities. But these groups remain controversial figures in the music world. So, what are your thoughts? Is there a band you think belongs on the hated but not that bad list? Share your favorite or most hated 70s tracks. Edison Lighthouse. Edison Lighthouse, an English pop outfit active from 1969 to 1977, borrowed their name from a historical landmark, the Eddystone Lighthouse, a pioneering offshore structure built over 3 centuries ago just off the coast of Plymouth. Though their career spanned several years, Edison Lighthouse is largely remembered as a one-hit wonder thanks to their infectious tune, Love Grows, Where My Rosemary Goes. Ironically, lead singer Tony Burrows departed the group shortly after this breakout success. Adding another layer of complexity, Burrows didn't own the rights to the band's name, so Edison Lighthouse continued to perform and release music without him, albeit with far less commercial success. Despite their relatively short time in the spotlight, Edison Lighthouse maintains a certain charm and nostalgia, especially for those who remember the early 70s pop scene. Love Grows remains a beloved classic, its catchy melody and romantic lyrics still resonating with audiences today. Surprisingly, Edison Lighthouse continues to tour and perform even now, keeping the spirit of their brief but shining moment alive. While they may never recapture the widespread popularity of their signature hit, their enduring presence in the music world suggests that perhaps, just perhaps, there's still room for love to grow for this resilient band. Captain and Tennille. Captain and Tennille. The name alone conjures up a specific, unmistakable image, a vision of plush velvet, disco balls, and a song about muskrats. Yep, muskrat love, the inescapable earworm that haunts many a childhood memory. You know, the song's so bad, so unforgettable, that it makes even grown adults have recurring nightmares about those semi-aquatic rodents. Once you see furries in Times Square, those nightmares get even worse. The original title for this musical monstrosity was supposed to be Muskrat Candlelight. Can you imagine the terror if they went with the even more terrifying Muskrats in the Dark? It's enough to make anyone run for the hills. Ironically, Captain and Tennille didn't even write the song. They only covered it from the original by Willis Allen Ramsey. Now, how on earth did this duo end up performing this song for Queen Elizabeth at the White House in 1976? I mean, who greenlit that? Gerald Ford, you're on the hook for this one. It's just not a groovy move. Of course, Captain and Tennille weren't just a musical act. They were also a married couple who lived their life in the spotlight. They were partners on and off the stage until 2014, when they announced their divorce after 40 years of marriage. It seems that even the most devoted of duos eventually face the music, or perhaps it was the muskrat love that ultimately broke them apart. The Ramones. The Ramones, a band synonymous with punk rock's raw energy and rebellious spirit. They were more than just a band. They were a sonic earthquake, a cultural force that shook up the music scene forever. Picture them on stage, 4 guys in identical black leather jackets, jeans, and sneakers. They looked alike, they moved alike, and they played like their lives depended on it. Dee Dee, the bassist, would yell out his signature 1, 2, 3, 4 before each song, as if to prepare you for the sonic blast that was about to hit. Then, Johnny the guitarist and Tommy, the drummer, would unleash a wave of high-octane, in-your-face music that practically pushed you back. On stage, they were like brothers, fierce, loud, and undeniably passionate. But off stage, things were a little different. They weren't exactly a tight-knit group of buddies. In fact, Johnny, the quiet guitarist, and Joey, the charismatic singer, barely communicated, even though they were the founders of this groundbreaking sound. Despite their wild, raucous performances, the Ramones didn't always get the recognition they deserved. Many in the music industry dismissed them as a one-time sensation, a fad that wouldn't last. They were seen as a novelty act, a one-trick pony with limited musical depth. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods, a British pop group, achieved a fleeting moment of fame with their hit single, "Billy Don't Be a Hero." Although purportedly inspired by the American Civil War, its release during the waning years of the Vietnam War indelibly linked the song to that conflict in the public consciousness. "Billy Don't Be a Hero" became their one and only chart topper. While the song tackles a serious theme, the horrors of war and the plea for a loved one to avoid needless heroism, its musical presentation is surprisingly upbeat and almost lighthearted. This juxtaposition creates a strange dissonance, bordering on trivializing the weighty subject matter. The lyrics, delivered with an almost cheerful melody, struck a discordant note with many listeners, leading to accusations of poor taste. This tonal mismatch cemented Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods' reputation as one of those acts that people either love or hate, with little room in between. For some, the song's catchy melody and heartfelt message resonated, perhaps offering a form of escapism from the grim realities of the time. For others, however, the seemingly flippant treatment of war, particularly against the backdrop of the still raw wounds of Vietnam, felt deeply disrespectful and inappropriate. This controversy ultimately overshadowed the band's career, making "Billy Don't Be a Hero" a bittersweet legacy, a song simultaneously remembered for its popularity and criticized for its perceived insensitivity. The Buggles. Were the Buggles MTV pioneers, or just a pale imitation of the Fab Four? This British new wave duo, featuring Trevor Horn on bass and vocals, definitely carved a unique niche for themselves in music history. The story goes that their unusual name, the Buggles, was inspired by Horn's large glasses, which supposedly made him look like, well, a bug. However, some critics dismissed them as a cheap knockoff of the Beatles. Regardless of their name's origin, one thing's for sure: the Buggles earned a permanent spot in the pop culture lexicon thanks to their groundbreaking track, "Video Killed the Radio Star." This iconic song holds the distinction of being the very first music video broadcast on MTV when it launched on August 1st, 1981. How fitting that a song about the changing media landscape ushered in a new era of music consumption. Interestingly, "Video Killed the Radio Star" didn't become an overnight sensation. The Buggles faced numerous rejections from record labels before finally landing a deal with Island Records, which happened to be owned by Trevor Horn's Girlfriend's label. Even then, they had to significantly rework the song to get it approved. This turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as it ultimately helped cement the track's legacy as synonymous with the birth of MTV. Back when it was all about music videos, not, shall we say, reality shows. While the song became a global smash hit in 1979, it didn't gain major traction in the US until MTV gave it the spotlight. Now, while "Video Killed the Radio Star" is undeniably catchy and holds a special place in our hearts, some of the Buggles' other material sounds a bit different. Imagine the kind of electronic high-energy tunes you might hear during the final boss battle of a vintage arcade game. That's the ballpark we're talking about. Despite their somewhat uneven catalog, the Buggles' contribution to music and television history is undeniable. They captured the zeitgeist of a changing era and inadvertently launched a visual revolution in music. Maurice Albert. Maurice Albert, the man behind the 1975 hit "Feelings," is a name that stirs up strong reactions, mostly of the "please make it stop" variety. This vague love song about, well, Feelings leaves listeners craving more, and not in a good way. While many have strong feelings about the song, some good, some bad, most folks would probably prefer it to vanish from the face of the earth. Feelings has been the butt of jokes for decades, its schmaltzy melody and generic lyrics inspiring endless parodies and memes. Albert never quite achieved mainstream success in the US, despite his song's international popularity. But, thankfully, he enjoyed a loyal following in his home country of Brazil. However, Feelings wasn't just plagued by audience fatigue. It also sparked controversy when French composer Lulu Gastet filed a lawsuit against Albert in 1988, claiming that the song's melody was plagiarized from his own composition. The lawsuit was successful, and Feelings became entangled in a messy legal battle. In the grand scheme of things, perhaps it's best to try and forget Feelings ever existed. We're all better off, let's face it. But if you're curious to experience the song's infamous appeal, or lack thereof, just remember that there's a reason it's become a punchline, and maybe even the subject of lawsuit drama. Which band on this list do you think was most unfairly maligned? The Doors. The Doors, a band that was more than just music. They were a cultural force, a voice for a generation yearning for change and questioning the status quo. Their music was raw, poetic, and infused with a sense of rebellion that spoke to those who felt alienated and restless. Jim Morrison, their charismatic frontman, was a poet in motion, captivating audiences with his lyrics that explored the dark side of life, death, sexuality, and the mysteries of the unconscious mind. They were hedonists, yes, but they were also pioneers of a countercultural movement, pushing boundaries and challenging societal norms. Their music, a blend of rock and roll and spoken word poetry, resonated deeply with a generation searching for something different, something beyond the mainstream. But, as is the case with any influential force, they also had their share of detractors. Some dismissed their music as too dark, too unsettling, even immoral. They accused their lyrics of being unclear and meandering. Despite these critics, the Doors' impact on music and popular culture is undeniable. Their influence can be heard in the music of countless artists who followed in their footsteps. Their music, with its raw energy and thought-provoking lyrics, continues to capture imaginations and spark conversation even today. Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, a name synonymous with rock royalty, soaring riffs, and legendary live shows. But behind the dazzling spectacle, a darker side emerged. Their music was undeniable, their stage presence captivating, but they were also accused of behaving badly. Their concerts were often marred by violence, with reports of aggressive behavior from their staff, management, and even some band members. Things took a disturbing turn when a journalist assigned to interview them was allegedly sexually assaulted. These allegations cast a dark shadow over their legacy. Then, there were the plagiarism accusations. From the start, critics and other musicians pointed out striking similarities between Led Zeppelin's songs and the work of lesser-known artists, often black musicians, who never achieved the same fame or fortune. This pattern of alleged borrowing continued throughout their career. While borrowing inspiration is common in music, Led Zeppelin's refusal to acknowledge their sources, let alone offer credit or compensation, added fuel to the fire. It's easy to imagine the frustration of these musicians who felt robbed of their rightful recognition and earnings. Jimmy Page, in particular, maintained a tight-lipped silence regarding these claims. His refusal to address these allegations only served to fuel the controversy and further erode their standing in the music community. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. The Eagles. The Eagles, a band that inspires passionate reactions, both positive and negative. You either love them or you hate them, There's no in-between. Some hail them as American icons, the embodiment of classic rock, while others condemn them as a band that deserve to be forgotten. It's a wild ride of opinions, a testament to the power of music to evoke strong emotions and opinions. You can even find articles like the one in Billboard that declares the Eagles the worst rock and roll band ever, even going so far as to write an article with the headline, "Glenn Frey's death is sad, but the Eagles were a horrific band." Now, why all the hate? What makes the Eagles the worst band? The criticisms are diverse and often rooted in personal opinions. Some take issue with their lyrics, their themes of hedonism and excess, accusing them of glorifying drug use and a carefree lifestyle. They question their commitment to artistic depth and originality, suggesting they were more about commercial success than artistic expression. There's a strong argument that a band's personal views and lifestyle shouldn't overshadow their musical contributions. Music is, after all, a form of expression, a way to convey feelings and ideas. It's about connecting with listeners on a deeper level. But the Eagles' personality and controversial image did cast a shadow on their musical achievements. Their music, while popular and commercially successful, wasn't universally loved. They weren't rebellious. They weren't punk rock. They weren't trying to shock or challenge the status quo. They were just a group of musicians who made music they loved. Rupert Holmes. Rupert Holmes, the man behind the ubiquitous Escape, the Pina Colada song, is a case study in how one hit can define an artist's legacy, sometimes overshadowing their entire career. Do you like pina coladas? Because you'll never be able to escape that song, even if you're not a fan of the drink, as was the case with Holmes himself, who, according to reports, actually dislikes the beverage. While many revel in the catchy melody and cheesy lyrics of Escape, while sipping on a pina colada by the beach, there's a strong argument to be made that more people hate it than love it. You might be shocked to learn that Holmes actually had another hit song in the 80s. But aside from those two singles, he wasn't a chart topper for very long. It seems that once you hit the musical jackpot with a song about a tropical beverage, it's tough to break free. However, Holmes has made his mark in a completely different arena, the world of Broadway. You might be surprised to learn that this seemingly one-hit wonder actually wrote and composed the Tony-winning musical, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which took home 5 awards, including Best Musical. Talk about a career pivot? And yes, I think there was probably a celebratory pina colada, or maybe even a couple in the mix, because it's hard to celebrate a Tony-winning musical without indulging in at least one cheesy, cliché tropical drink. Genesis, a band that sparks fervent debate among music enthusiasts. While some hold them up as icons of progressive rock, others contend that their later work was less than stellar. You can easily find online lists and blog posts dedicated to highlighting the worst Genesis songs, proving that the band's legacy remains a bit divisive. Truth is, Genesis went through some major stylistic transformations over their long career. Early on, they were pioneers of progressive rock, renowned for their complex compositions, lyrical depth, and theatrical stage shows. This was the era of Peter Gabriel's enigmatic vocals and Phil Collins' powerful drumming. These guys were seriously talented musicians in their own right. But by the late 70s, Genesis took a different direction, embracing a more commercially accessible sound. Some critics argue that their peak was actually in the mid-80s, with Phil Collins fronting the band and producing hits like Invisible Touch. However, others consider this shift a betrayal of their original sound, a move towards bland pop music that lacked the complexity and depth of their early years. So, does Genesis rock or not? Ultimately, it boils down to personal preference. If you love the intricate musical landscapes of progressive rock, Genesis's early work will probably resonate with you. However, If you prefer catchy melodies and upbeat anthems, you might find their later albums more appealing. Whatever your take, Genesis's influence on music is undeniable. They've been around for decades, and their music continues to capture the imaginations of listeners, even if their overall artistic journey is viewed with mixed emotions. The Carpenters. The Carpenters, a name that conjures up images of soft melodies, delicate harmonies, and Karen Carpenter's angelic voice. This brother and sister duo, consisting of Karen, 1950-1983, and Richard Carpenter, born 1946, left an undeniable mark on the music world with their unique sound. Karen's rich contralto voice was the heart of their music, while Richard's talent as an arranger, songwriter, and producer provided the musical framework. Their distinct style, a blend of pop, rock, and orchestral arrangements, set them apart from their contemporaries and captured the hearts of millions. Over their successful 14-year career, they released 10 studio albums, leaving behind a treasure trove of beloved tunes. But not everyone was smitten with their sound. The Carpenters' music, with its delicate arrangements, prominent electric guitars, and Karen's ethereal vocals, was a recipe for controversy. While some embraced their unique combination of pop and rock, others found it unsettling and even sent hate mail expressing their disdain. Ironically, this polarizing style became their secret weapon. Their defiance of categorization, a refusal to be confined to a single musical genre, allowed them to appeal to a wider audience, drawing in fans who wouldn't have gravitated towards traditional pop or rock alone. The Carpenters' music was more than just beautiful melodies and soaring vocals. It was a testament to their unique creative vision and musical brilliance. It's a sound that continues to captivate and divide audiences today, proving that sometimes the most distinctive styles are the ones that spark the most passionate reactions. Bad Company. Bad Company, a band that brought a hard-rocking sound to the 70s music scene. They were a talented bunch, featuring the powerhouse vocals of Paul Rodgers, the skilled guitar work of Mick Ralphs, and the driving drumming of Simon Kirke. It's funny how Bad Company and Led Zeppelin, two iconic bands of that era, shared the same manager, Peter Grant. Bad Company had their moments. They released some high-energy, loud tracks that got people moving and shaking. They developed a distinctive sound, attracting a devoted fan base who loved their hard-rocking style. But as with many bands, their success wasn't everlasting. They were seen as decent, but not exceptional. While their first 3 albums, Bad Company, Straight Shooter, and Run with the Pack, topped the charts in the UK and the US, they were often criticized for not offering anything truly groundbreaking. Their success was seen as a product of the right time and the right sound, but not something that would last forever. Bad Company eventually disbanded in 1982, but they reunited for several projects throughout the years. Sadly, Paul Rodgers' recent health struggles might mean we won't see them together again. Kiss. Kiss, a band that sparked both adoration and disdain. Known for their raucous hard rock, their flamboyant style was as much a part of the show as their music. Think explosive pyrotechnics, flamboyant costumes, and those iconic makeup looks. They were a spectacle to behold. They built their career on writing simple but catchy tunes with driving rhythms, anthemic choruses, and lyrics that spoke to rebellion, love, and good old-fashioned partying. While their live performances were legendary, their studio recordings weren't quite as electric. In fact, their breakthrough live album, Alive, required a hefty dose of overdubbing to achieve that raw, energetic sound they were known for. This, of course, sparked debate about the authenticity of their live shows. Their lyrics also garnered mixed reactions. Some saw them as simple, juvenile, and lacking in depth. Others, however, embraced their straightforward rock and roll attitude. And let's not forget those over-the-top stage antics. The band wasn't afraid to be theatrical. Think smoke-filled stages, fake blood, and a whole lot of pyrotechnics. Love it or hate it, There's no denying their commitment to spectacle. Then there's Gene Simmons, the band's frontman and a true character. His stage persona, with its dramatic kabuki-inspired makeup, spiked boots, and signature tongue, was a force to be reckoned with. For some, his theatrics were over the top, even bordering on comical. Critics questioned whether they were a cheap substitute for genuine musical talent. But here's the thing. Who's to say a band needs fancy stage shows and a little bit of camp to connect with their audience? Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent, a name that conjures up images of hard-rocking riffs, powerful vocals, and a controversial persona. He launched his solo career in 1975 after a stint with the Amboy Dukes with his self-titled debut album featuring the iconic Stranglehold. This 8-minute track, with its bluesy extended guitar solo and Meat Loaf's distinctive vocals, cemented his sound and propelled him to stardom. Nugent's music is undoubtedly hard-rocking, full of energy and a signature bluesy feel. His early albums are brimming with raw power, a sound that resonated with rock fans. However, his later albums, some critics argue, lost that dynamism, becoming more predictable and lacking in that signature edge. But it's his controversial views, not just his music, that have generated so much heat around Ted Nugent. His strong opinions on guns, his outspoken political stances, and his controversial comments on various social issues have attracted criticism and polarizing reactions. His ideology, particularly his pro-gun stance, has sparked heated debate, leading to backlash and accusations of being insensitive and out of touch. Did we miss any 70s bands that you think should be on the hated but not that bad list? The Pretenders. The Pretenders, a band known for their raw energy, Chrissie Hynde's powerful vocals, and the tight musical interplay between the original members. They stormed onto the music scene in 1978 with hits like Kid and Brass in Pocket, solidifying their place in the hearts of many fans. But their journey was marred by tragedy. First, James Honeyman Scott, their talented guitarist, died in 1982, followed by bassist Pete Farndon in 1983. These losses, coupled with the band's struggle with drug addiction and the challenging task of replacing key members, led to a shift in the band's sound. The band went through several lineup changes, and their music, while still recognizable, lost some of that raw edge. Chrissie Hynde herself acknowledged the decline in the quality of their performances, attributing it to the loss of her original bandmates, the pressures of maintaining stardom, and the toll drug use took on the band. The Pretenders never really faced hatred, but there was a sense of disappointment among some fans who felt their later work didn't live up to the brilliance of their early days. The high expectations set by their groundbreaking debut were hard to maintain, especially after facing such significant personal losses. The Misfits. The Misfits weren't your average punk band. They were something more, a blend of horror, humor, and raw energy that left a lasting mark on music. They were pioneers of horror punk, unafraid to explore the dark and the macabre, infusing their music with tales of monsters, brutality, and chilling sci-fi themes. Their music was more than just an anthem of adolescent rebellion. It was a sonic horror film brought to life, delivered at breakneck speed. But it wasn't all about shock value. The Misfits had a wicked sense of humor, a twisted wit that made their music both terrifying and entertaining. They knew how to blend those elements, creating a sound that was unique, undeniably engaging, and sometimes a little unsettling. This blend of horror and humor was their signature style, but over time, some questioned whether it was time for a change, a shift in direction. Was it ethical to constantly explore the dark side of humanity? The Misfits were a band that pushed boundaries, exploring a world of darkness and shadows. Their music challenged societal norms and embraced the macabre, making them a force to be reckoned with in the punk rock world. But as with any band that pushes limits, they faced criticism and ethical dilemmas. Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath, the pioneers of heavy metal, created a sound that shook the world. But behind the dark, brooding music and the captivating vocals of Ozzy Osbourne, there was a tumultuous journey. As the band progressed and experimented with their sound, tensions grew. Creative differences, a constant battle in any band, became amplified with Black Sabbath. Band members clashed over the direction of their music, creating a rift that deepened over time. These creative differences were compounded by personal struggles and the heavy toll of substance abuse. Ozzy Osbourne, the band's lead singer, struggled with addiction, particularly cocaine. The financial and emotional strains of his addiction took a toll on the band, creating more friction and tension. Black Sabbath was a powerful force in music, but they were also a human story, a testament to the challenges that come with creative collaboration, personal growth, and the dark side of fame. They pushed the boundaries of rock music and created a genre that would change the landscape of music, but in the process, they had to face their own demons. REO Speedwagon. REO Speedwagon, a band that achieved remarkable commercial success, selling over 40 million records and reaching diamond status. They were a big deal in the 80s, but their journey to success began in the 70s. While their music resonated with a large audience, some critics weren't so enthusiastic. One of the biggest points of contention: their lead vocalist, Kevin Cronin. His nasal singing style, that distinctive sound, was a turnoff for some, despite his incredible ability to belt out hit songs that landed on the Billboard 100. But it wasn't just the vocals that drew criticism. REO Speedwagon's lyrics were often seen as shallow and lacking in consistency. One prime example? Take It on the Run, from their 1980 album High Infidelity, a song that tells a confusing tale of a man struggling with his girlfriend's alleged infidelity. The song is all over the place, making it a bit hard to follow. Despite these criticisms, REO Speedwagon carved out a significant space in the music world. They were a band that achieved great success, but their music was often dismissed as lacking depth, both musically and lyrically. They weren't considered groundbreaking, but they did make their mark on the music scene with their catchy tunes and energetic performances. They were a band that appealed to a wide audience, even if some listeners weren't convinced by their lyrical consistency or Kevin Cronin's distinctive vocals. Grand Funk Railroad. Grand Funk Railroad, or Grand Funk as they were commonly known, burst onto the music scene in 1969, hailing from the industrial heartland of Flint, Michigan. Their sound was built on the foundation of a powerhouse trio: Mark Farner, a multi-talented musician who handled vocals, guitar, keyboards, and harmonica; Don Brewer, a drummer with a ferocious beat who also added vocals; and Mel Shacker, the bassist who laid down solid driving grooves. Grand Funk's popularity exploded in the 70s, with hits like We're an American Band, I'm Your Captain, A Closer to Home, and Some Kind of Wonderful, a bluesy tune originally done by the Soul Brothers Six. But why were they also a target for some music critics? While hatred might be a strong word, Grand Funk certainly didn't receive the kind of critical acclaim that other bands enjoyed. Their offense? Their music. Critics often dismissed it as simple, even going so far as to call it dumb. Imagine your older brother, the connoisseur of prog rock, rolling his eyes and demanding you put away that stupid Grand Funk album. Their hard-rocking style, built on powerful rhythms and straightforward lyrics, wasn't exactly the cool kid's choice of music. Despite this critical disdain, Grand Funk's impact on hard-edged rock music cannot be denied. They helped pave the way for the sounds of bands that would follow, bands that embraced raw energy and a more straightforward style. They were the band your older brother thought was uncool, but who ended up shaping the sound of rock music for years to come. Thanks for joining us on this nostalgic ride through the sounds of the 60s. If you enjoyed uncovering these forgotten gems, give us a like and hit subscribe for more deep dives into music history. Share your favorite Gone group from the 60s in the comments. We'd love to hear who still plays in your memory.